Hello time travelers! I wanted to do a test with the 3060 12 gig versus the 3080 because it only has 10 gigs of VRAM to show you how this is a sweet deal when you're running AI workloads. But then I thought, what about the 3080 Ti because it's got 12 gigs of VRAM? And then I went, oh, what about the 3090? And I threw in my 1660 Super into the test and the 1080 Ti I had and the 3070. And a friend of mine in Discord threw in his 4090 for the test. He didn't send it to me. He did the test himself, so I had to write a whole document with instructions. And another friend of mine on Discord has two AX5000s that when you NVLink them together, they share the VRAM. So 48 gigs of VRAM. Well, I've got some of those tests in here too. So if you're looking at a GPU you're thinking of buying and it's only got 8 gigabytes of VRAM, stop. You need to see the results of these tests.
This is my look of disapproval.
All right, obviously, before we get into all the tests, I have to show you my testing methodology. I did 5 tests on each GPU. Generating images with SD 1.5 using automatic 1111. Generating images with SD 1.5 using Forge. Generating images with SDXL using Forge. And I didn't do that for automatic 1111 because most of the GPUs would have failed. So I didn't even waste time with that. Training an SD 1.5 LoRA using Kohya and using Kohya to train an SDXL LoRA. For each test, I looked at how long it took to do it, as well as the peak VRAM use, like the highest the VRAM got used during the whole test, because some people think about, okay, what's the sustained VRAM use? What's the point of that? The point of that could be, can I have other programs open at the same time? But if your VRAM peaks really high and gets close to 100%, you cannot have other stuff open because you'll either lock up the computer or the training will freeze or the training will keep going but come out wonky. I've had that happen. First, I'll show you how I did the tests with generating images. And what I did was I just changed the batch count to 6 and then go to my main computer over here, open up OBS, hit record, go back and click generate. Then I would, do other stuff on my other monitor on my computer and keep an eye on this. And when this button turned gray again, I would hit stop on OBS and then take that recording into my video editing software. And I would put a time code thingy what's it in there and have the time code start right as I hit generate and the button turned gray. That's what I called start. And then in the time code thingy, when it got to the end, when this button turned orange again, is when I would count it being as done. And the time code would give me the exact amount of time of how long it took. Now I'm going to show you how I did the LoRA training tests. I used Kohya version 22.6.2, which I talked about in a previous video because people were having problems with some of the things that make Kohya work, and some people on Discord helped me figure out how to get it back to this version. But the newer versions don't have a feature that the older one did, and let me show you. And what I did was I changed the epoch to 1 because, again, I don't have all freaking weekend just to do a couple of tests with one GPU. I'm not actually trying to train a good LoRA, I'm just comparing performance between GPUs. So epoch 1 was fine. When you scroll down to the end, though, in this older version of Kohya, you can hit print training command. Yes, that test folder already has a LoRA file in there. Yes, I'm going to overwrite, I don't care. But print training command, what that does is it spit this out. So I would copy this and go over to this LoRA training command, VBS that I have linked in the description. It's on my GitHub. I delete the old one, double click that so it makes a blank file, paste this in and save it and close it. And when I run this again, it makes this right here. So I would rename this file. Here's my testing folder. Here's the SD 1.5 one and here's the SDXL one. What I did was I go down here and I add this part where it saves a timestamp to a file. This is what that part right here means. It's outputting into a file, and then it runs the actual training right here, accelerate launch. And because the environment's activated right here and it's set to the folder where I have Kohya installed, it uses that version of Kohya to run that training command. And then when it's done, it outputs a timestamp. So I would be able to do math. I'll show you another thing here. This is my normal GPU stats thing that I would put down here when I'm doing my image generating. That way I could see the VRAM use as I scrub through the OBS recording and look for the highest number. It's a bash script that I made that uses NVIDIA SMI, and it's more accurate than Task Manager or even Hardware Info 64. You can click the card above or check the video descriptables below later if you want to learn more about it. But I made another version of this for doing training, which is invisible. It just outputs to a text file. So if I run, say, the SD 1.5 training, it does too. Here it's starting up the Kohya environment thingy, and then it's going to train. But I'm going to close it because I don't need that right now. So after training's done, I would have these timestamps for the start and the end. I can do some math to figure out how long that took. And the VRAM one looks like this. So, 6 gigs of VRAM inside of the 1660 Super. And at this timestamp, right here, it's using 220 megs, but if you scroll down, it's using 48 megs right there. And I would just run a script on this to grab the biggest number because, again, we're looking for the peak VRAM use. As for the guys who did some tests for me on their machines, I made this Google Doc for them, and so they could follow through it and make sure that everything matched, so they were doing the same tests as me. For more information about this, I'm going to have the instructions of how I did this in my tier 2 folder on my Patreon. In there. I'm going to have all my stuff and the results of all these tests. All the charts are going to be in there. For all of the slides that you're going to see in this video, lower is better because I've only got 2 types of slides. How long something took and how much VRAM it peaked at.
I wanted to do all tests on this computer so that same version of Stable Diffusion, same version of Forge, same version of Kohya. So what I did was I copied my installations of Automatic 1111, Forge, and the separate one I had for Forge SDXL from the kitchen computer onto this computer. And I already had the same version of Kohya on this computer because it's an older one with the old GUI. So all of that testing was the same, even though the computer's different, different CPU, different memory. I'm just trying to get as close as possible so I can get a general idea of how these GPUs perform. I also had to test Mystery Meat GPU in the mining rig because in order to cool it, it wouldn't fit in the other computer. But that's the only hint you get about that GPU. You're going to have to wait until later in the video when I reveal what it is. So stop trying to cheat.
All right, what y'all been waiting for, the results. Now let's talk about generating images for SD 1.5 in Automatic 1111. Obviously, the winner in a short generation time is the RTX 4090 that eVirus did for me.
And check out the 4050 GPU in my new laptop. It's only got 6 gigabytes of VRAM, but it beats out the Unsolved Mysteries card. But still at 1 hour, 13 minutes, forget about it.
And look at the RTX 3070 and the 3080. With 8 gigabytes and 10 gigabytes of VRAM respectively, they're just not worth it. This data proves that the RTX 3060 12 gig can hold up due to having more VRAM.
But the 1660 Super with only 6 gigabytes of VRAM, well, this GPU was the first GPU I bought after starting my YouTube channel when I realized the GTX 960 that I had in there for my minimal gaming use was not enough for editing videos. But this thing kept cranking. Even though the 3070 and the 3080, which are newer and have more VRAM, had out of memory errors, I have no idea why. What? And before you ask in the comments, did you reboot the computer? Did you make sure nothing else was running? Did you do multiple tests? Oh, they were all out of memory errors with those. I did multiple tests with this, and this just worked every time. I don't get it. For a budget, minimal gaming experience, I recommend this one. 1660 Super any day. Like for a bunch of 2D games that they have on Steam, or maybe you're running emulators. I don't care. I'm not your grandma. But the RTX 4050 here with 6 gigabytes of VRAM is interesting because it's newer, has more CUDA cores, and blah, 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 it can do something. But if you've got the dollary dues, you want to look at the 3080 Ti or maybe even the 3090.
The 3090 has good generation times for me. I use it for generating images, sometimes even when I'm editing videos, and it's fine. But I can't train SDXL LoRa's, or it'll peak the VRAM and lock up. However, for these tests, I did move it to the computer in the kitchen, so it would be apples to apples, or whatever you want to call it. Now what's interesting is if you look at eVibrus's 4090 versus Darkbraw's pair of A5000s connected together with NVLink, the A5000s are server-grade GPUs with the same die as the RTX 3090 and the 3090 Ti, but the 4090 is almost twice as fast due to being a newer generation. The NVLink on the A5000 shares VRAM, but you only get the performance from one of the two GPUs. The A5000 has 8,192 CUDA cores, but the 4090 has a whopping 16,384. I wish I had a 4070 Ti Super, like I was talking about in my 4000 series supercards video that I did, because it has 8,448 CUDA cores versus my new laptop with the 4050 in there, which only has 2,560 CUDA cores. And the 4070 Ti Super has 10 gigabytes more VRAM. Why I say that is because I was surprised at how fast it was at generating and doing some of the tasks. Now I'd really like to have my hands on a 4000 series card. If you have a 4070 Ti Super, please let me know in the comments, so that I could set you up with the stuff so that you can run these tests on your GPU, because I really like to see how it performs. Now let's take a look at the peak VRAM use of generating images for SD 1.5 with automatic 1111. Everyone's suffering here except the two AX5000s and the 4090, obviously. But enough about who dragged their feet the most in automatic 1111. Let's move on to the faster fork, Forge. All right, let's talk about generating images for SD 1.5 in Forge. Again, the 4090 takes half the time of the two A5000s, but let's take a look at some GPUs that are actually not unobtainium.
All the 3000 series cards scale pretty much evenly here, including the 3060 12 gig, proving its value for the dollar. The 4050 laptop GPU takes longer than the 3060 12 gig. Well, isn't that interesting? Forge scales its memory use, and you don't even have to use the low VRAM flag like you have to do in automatic 1111. By the way, I didn't use settings like that even for the RTX 3070 and the 3080 before with automatic 1111 because I knew it would skew the results. I just let them run out of memory. But your lower RAM GPUs, the 3070 and the 3080, are really holding up here. I was surprised. If you're thinking about getting one of these because they're around in your budget range, I actually recommend getting the 3080 Ti. I do a ton of work on that thing because it's got 12 gigs of VRAM, and it's faster than the 3060 12 gig. It's because the 3080 Ti has 10,240 CUDA cores versus the 3,584 that the 3060 12 gig has.
All right, let's take a look at the peak VRAM use generating ST 1.5 images in Forge. Look at the card with unexplained powers. It didn't peak too high this time. It's too bad that it took forever in the previous slide.
But the 3090, the AX5000, or getting two of them, or the 4090, or any other 24 gigabyte or higher GPU, if that's possible, are the only GPUs that I would recommend to have other stuff running while you're generating images or training, just to avoid shenanigans. And again, I would just love to see the results of a 4070 Ti Super with its 16 gigabytes of VRAM.
Now let's take a look at the results of generating SDXL images in Forge. I mean, look at the RTX 3060 12 gig performs so well when compared to much more expensive cards. I wouldn't even waste my time with older generation cards here. Like, nope. But if you've got the cash, maybe check out the 3080 Ti. It's going to be a better choice for the workflow because it would save you tons of time overall. And it would be a better choice for gaming as well. All right, let's take a look at peak VRAM use when generating SDXL images in Forge.
Okay, I scrubbed all over the timeline to check the VRAM use of the 3090, and for some reason it performed the best out of all the other ones. I don't know why. Maybe it's EVGA magic mumbo jumbo in their GPU. And I didn't test it in this machine. To make sure all tests were equal, I took it out of this machine and put it in the other machine. And also the GPU that I'll call mystery father that you're getting when you get adopted GPU.
Is a pandemic issues.
What'd you say? Well, it didn't use 90+% of its VRAM when it peaked. So weird. Hint, it also has 24 gigabytes of VRAM. Oops, I gave you guys another hint. Dang it.
And now a really quick self-promo. I'm about to get into the really important stuff, the training time and peak VRAM while doing SDXL and SD 1.5 LoRa training. And here, VRAM is key. The GPU type you can tweak and get some sort of performance gains, but the GPU for performance gives you a much bigger gain if you get a newer one when you're generating than it does when you're training. So for example, a couple people on my Discord, they use an older GPU in a different computer for their training than the modern GPU that they do generating images on. I've done 2 videos about this. The one about the RTX 3060 12 gig and the one about the 4000 Super cards. That's your 4070 Super, 4070 Ti Super, and the 4080 Super. But as far as I know, I'm the only person doing Stable Diffusion videos that also talks about the hardware. So if you appreciate what I'm doing here and you'd like to support the channel, then click down below in the descriptive do's and check out my Patreon, see if there's something there that you're interested in. It'd be super appreciated because yes, the money I get from there actually goes into the channel. I use that money to buy the 3060 12 gig and the Dark Bra wasn't able to test his GPUs doing the LoRa trainings. I'm sorry. And I can't get into the details of the reasons why.
Walk out the door, you see someone that you know and they ask you how you are, and you just have to say that you're fine when you're not really fine, but you just can't get into it because they would never understand.
All right, now let's move on to our first LoRa training section, which is SD 1.5.
And again, the 3060 12 gig is proven its worth in relation to the other cards. Just look how the time pretty much scales evenly over each GPU as you go down. And I'll tell you what the unknown flavor GPU is. It's a Tesla P40. Where is it? It's written on here somewhere. See, right there. I've got 2 of them because first time I got one, it kept crashing. And I thought something was wrong with it because I've owned a lot of GPUs and it was crashing the same way a bad GPU was crashing. And I reached out to the seller and he said, oh, those cards get really hot. So I bought a second one to make sure it was doing the same thing. A little frustrating for me because I paid $160 for the first one I got. And then I had to spend $350 because for some reason the prices went up. And I looked all over eBay and I found the best cooling solution in my opinion. It's this like pressure fitting shroud that someone made on a 3D printer, and you just push it on until you hear it kind of snap and it grabs it, and it comes with this fan that's pretty loud. Check it out. There's just a regular fan header on the board, and if I move it over to the pump fan, which is always higher RPMs, but you can put any 80 millimeter fans in there. And I'm going to be trying these Pure Wings 2 fans, see how I like them, because I tinker. It's what I do. That's why you subscribe to this channel, right? The reason why I bought them, the real point, was to see if maybe a second computer with a slow GPU that had 24 gigabytes of VRAM doing experiments like large batches of SDXL generations and training would help you. But oh well. The price is too high and they're pretty slow. If you want to tinker, either way, I will have the link for these fans in the description.
All right, let's take a look at the VRAM use training LoRa for SD 1.5. This chart's all over the place, but it's clear that the 24 gigabyte VRAM cards are doing very well with this. This is a training config that I developed with some people on Discord, and it uses less than 8 gigabytes of VRAM, but we are recording the peaks here. On a slight tangent, some people in my comments and on Discord keep asking me for a perfect LoRa training config, and I've been working on that. And I plan on coming out one in the future video, but I want to do a lot of testing to make sure that it's generalized so you can use it as a starting point. But take a look at the 12 gigabyte VRAM cards here, back at the same chart. The real winners are the 3080 Ti and the 3060 12 gig because they both have 12 gigabytes of VRAM and they have much lower cost for their performance. All right, let's check out SDXL training. The only GPUs you want if you are in a hurry for SDXL training are the more modern 24GB VRAM GPUs. And before you start keyboard warrioring me in the comments about some other channel doing LoRa training in X amount of time, let me remind you, it's not about time, it's about quality. A good LoRa training isn't done in a few minutes, even in SD 1.51. Before I did these videos, I watched their videos, and then later on I figured out that like when they're doing an embedding or a LoRa training, maybe they didn't know they were doing this, but they were combining their trained model with that celebrity's face that was already in the base checkpoint they were using.
But again, look at the 3080 Ti and the 3060 12 gig here. 12 gigabytes of VRAM is a win. But the lower VRAM on the older GPUs, and even the more recent 3070 and 3080 are a complete waste of time, with the training coming in at 30 to 33 hours for those. And that's only one epoch.
All right, now let's take a look at SDXL training peak VRAM usage.
The 3090 wins here. I'm not surprised. I do all my SDXL training on it, and my second best card to that was the 3080 Ti, but it takes too long and crashes sometimes, which I don't like because I can't edit videos while training SDXL.
I think it might be possible that eVirus had other stuff running while doing his test here. Because VRAM-wise, the RTX 3090 and the Tesla P40 did as I expected by not using all of their 24 gigabytes of VRAM. But I don't know why his GPU used 54%. It makes me think maybe he had some other stuff open.
What do you guys think? I've been toying around with this idea. Should I start a GoFundMe to buy a 3090 Ti or a 4090? One of those? Neither one of those will fit in this case because they're too long and too chonkery thick. But I was thinking of throwing it in the mining rig over there. Tell me what you think in the comments. Be honest, but be nice.
And now for the summary and the conclusions.
1080 Ti. Don't waste your time with it, with AI stuff. Yes, it's got 11 gigabytes of VRAM. It's not going to help you much with Stable Diffusion, generating videos, or training. Maybe with some different AI workloads, I don't know, but it's way too slow. For this and the 1660 Super and the P40, they're not in my hands right now. I had to change my trainings from BF16 to FP16. What is that? That's floating point. And the BF16 is only supported on RTX 3000 or newer cards. So all your 3000 cards, all your 4000 cards. And it's more precise and you get better results with it. I did a LoRa training settings comparison video. You can click that card here. It's really long, but you can check the chapters and get the part you want to see. But I proved that the BF16 is better. And moving forward, I think you're going to want BF16. Tesla P40. It's the 1080 Ti with 24 gigs of VRAM. And if you're being ambitious and you want to play around and test with stuff, that would be a good reason to get it. But don't rely on it to be fast because it's not. If you find one for cheap, you can grab it. And make sure you get this cooler off of eBay. Link in descriptables. Well, I proved it. The 3060 12 gig is a great value for the money. Obviously, I didn't talk about prices too much. Y'all know how to use Newegg, Amazon, and eBay to look how much stuff is. I just checked eBay before filming this scene, and I found some used ones that were under $250. Obviously, the market fluctuates, so you want to keep an eye on things. The 3070 and the 3080 aren't really worth it for AI workloads, unless you already have one. Then you can start playing around and see what you can do. If you have one of these, consider saving up and getting something better and then selling it. If you already have one of these though, I want to get a 3060 12 gig because your graphics performance and your speed's going to go down. I would save it for a 3080 Ti or better. But I just checked eBay, and right now the 3080 Ti is about twice that, around 550 bucks. Honestly, I'm just thinking if I didn't have one, I saved up for my 3060 12 gig and got it. Just save up twice as long. And if you already have a 3080 Ti, hold on to it. It's pretty good. I use it most of the time. It's right there. I do a lot of the stuff that I sell on my Patreon on that thing. And if you're going to save up, go ahead and save up and get the 3090. It'll be worth it. So the A5000 is just a 3090 GPU with more VRAM pretty much. So I'd actually recommend, if you're going to spend more, get a 3090 Ti, because when the 3090 came out, it had half of the VRAM on the backplate side, which is why I have a fan right here. Barely helps it. But then the memory manufacturer, Hynix, I think, they figured out how to double the density of their VRAM, and they put it all on the cooler side. So the 3090 Ti should perform better in high VRAM workloads. For example, with the side of my case open, I could touch this and I could tell just by touching it, or checking, obviously, hardware info 64. But the ones that really cooked this card was embedding training. 4090, if you've got the money for it, and the correct power supply, and the right cables to power the GPU, so that it doesn't catch on frickin' fire, and you have a case that can fit its chunkeriness into it, I think that GPU will be an AI powerhouse for the foreseeable future. Obviously, if you haven't seen my other videos about GPUs, you need to see those. Right over here is the one for the 3060 12 gig. And right down here is the one for the 4000 series Super ones. Because if you're going to spend your money, you should go into that purchase well informed. And subscribe! And Patreon me! And I'll see you guys in the next video.